The Miami sun painted golden streaks across the weathered benches of Flamingo Park, where Alexander Reeves sat watching young children chase soccer balls across the worn grass. His eyes followed their movements with a mixture of joy and melancholy, each kick and laugh reminding him of a life he once had. A life that seemed more like a distant dream with each passing day. 5 years ago, Alexander had been living the quintessential American dream in a modest but comfortable house in Coral Gables. He had a stable job as a high school physical education teacher, a loving wife named Isabella, and their pride and joy, their 8-year-old son Lucas, whose passion for soccer mirrored his own childhood dreams. Lucas would spend hours in their backyard, practicing his footwork and pretending to score winning goals in imaginary World Cup matches. Isabella would watch from the kitchen window, her warm smile lighting up their home as she prepared dinner, while Alexander helped their son perfect his technique. Those evenings were filled with laughter, hope, and the kind of happiness that seemed unbreakable. "Dad, do you think I'll play professionally someday?" Lucas would ask, his eyes sparkling with determination and dreams too big for his small frame. "With dedication and heart like yours, mijo, anything is possible," Alexander would answer, tousling his son's dark hair, the same shade as Isabella's. The Reeves family was known in their community for their involvement in youth soccer programs. Alexander coached the local children's team, while Isabella organized fundraisers for new equipment and uniforms. Their weekends were filled with matches, team picnics, and the joyful chaos of young athletes and their families coming together to share their love of the beautiful game. Living in Miami, they were surrounded by the vibrant fusion of cultures that made the city unique. Isabella, with her Cuban heritage, had brought the passionate Latin American soccer culture into their home, while Alexander's American upbringing added its own flavor to their family's love for the sport. Their home was a testament to this blend, with both English and Spanish flowing freely through their conversations, and soccer memorabilia from both countries adorning their walls. But life has a way of changing course when you least expect it. One rainy evening in March, while driving home from a late soccer practice, Isabella's car was struck by a delivery truck that had run a red light. The impact was devastating, leaving Alexander to face a reality he never imagined possible. The doctors did everything they could, but Isabella's injuries were too severe. The loss of Isabella sent Alexander into a spiral of grief that seemed bottomless. The once energetic coach became a shell of his former self, unable to step onto a soccer field without being overwhelmed by memories of his wife cheering from the sidelines. The simple act of watching Lucas practice in the backyard became unbearable, as every movement reminded him of the family moments they would never share again. Depression wrapped its heavy chains around Alexander's heart and mind. He began missing days at work, unable to face the sympathetic looks from his colleagues and the constant reminders of his loss in the faces of his students. The school administration was understanding at first, but as weeks turned into months and his performance continued to decline, they were forced to make a difficult decision. The termination letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, its formal language doing little to soften the blow. Without his income, the modest life they had built began to crumble. Bills piled up, late notices arrived with increasing frequency, and the comfortable home they had created began to feel like a museum of memories he couldn't bear to face. Lucas, too young to fully comprehend the depth of their tragedy, would still kick his soccer ball against the garage door every afternoon, the rhythmic thud-thud-thud serving as a heartbreaking reminder of the normalcy they had lost. He would look at his father with confusion and concern, his young mind struggling to understand why Dad no longer joined him for practice or attended his games. As their financial situation worsened, Alexander's mental state continued to deteriorate. The grief counseling sessions he had begun attending became an unaffordable luxury. The mortgage payments fell further behind, and the threat of foreclosure loomed over their heads like a dark cloud. The same community that had once embraced them now whispered about their decline, their concern mixed with an uncomfortable desire to keep their distance from others' misfortune. One morning, while going through their mail, Alexander found a letter from Child Protective Services. The school had reported their concerns about Lucas's changing behavior and his father's increasing inability to provide proper care. The letter spoke of evaluations and assessments, of ensuring the child's well-being, and of options that might need to be considered. That letter marked the beginning of the end of Alexander's life as he knew it. The realization that he might lose not only his wife, but also his son became the weight that finally broke him. As he sat in their increasingly empty home, holding Lucas's worn soccer ball, he faced the horrifying truth that he was no longer capable of being the father his son deserved. The decision to give up custody of Lucas to Isabella's sister Carmen was the hardest choice Alexander had ever made. Carmen lived in Orlando with her husband, both successful professionals who could provide Lucas with the stability and opportunities he deserved. The day they came to take Lucas, Alexander couldn't even bring himself to say goodbye properly, watching from behind drawn curtains as his son clutched his soccer ball and looked back at the house one last time. That evening, Alexander wrote a letter to Lucas, pouring out his heart, his regrets, and his unconditional love. He folded it carefully and placed it in his wallet, where it would remain for years to come, becoming worn and fragile like the memories it contained. As night fell, he walked out of their home for the last time, leaving behind the remnants of a life that had once seemed perfect, carrying with him only his grief and the desperate hope that someday, somehow, he would find a way to make things right. The streets of Miami had a way of transforming people, of wearing down their edges until they became almost invisible to the rushing crowds of tourists and locals alike. For Alexander Reeves, this transformation had been gradual but complete. His once athletic frame had become gaunt, his formerly neat appearance replaced by the weathered look of someone who called the streets home. He had found his spot near the bustling area of downtown Miami, where the contrast between wealth and poverty was stark, but somehow less noticed. During the day, he would sit quietly on his piece of cardboard, watching people hurry past, occasionally receiving spare change or leftover food from kind-hearted strangers. At night, he would make his way to a sheltered alcove near an old church, where the priest would sometimes leave blankets for the homeless who gathered there. Despite the hardships of street life, Alexander maintained one daily ritual that kept him connected to his past. Every evening as the sun began to set, he would walk to the nearest public park where children played soccer. He would stand at a distance, watching their games with a mixture of longing and hope, imagining Lucas among them, growing stronger and faster, pursuing his dreams without the burden of a broken father. The worn letter in his wallet had become his most precious possession. On particularly difficult nights, he would carefully unfold it, reading the words he had written to Lucas years ago by the light of street lamps. The paper had become delicate with age and handling, but the words remained clear in his heart. "My dearest Lucas, I hope someday you'll understand that leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. Your dreams were too bright to be dimmed by my darkness. Life on the streets had its own community, its own unwritten rules and unexpected kindnesses. Maria, an elderly Cuban woman who ran a small cafeteria nearby, would sometimes slip him a warm coffee and a Cuban sandwich, reminiscing about her own son who had moved away years ago. Through her broken English and his rusty Spanish, they shared a connection that reminded him of his humanity. Time became fluid in this existence, marked not by calendars or clocks, but by the changing seasons and the ebb and flow of the city's rhythms. Alexander lost track of how many years had passed, but he never lost track of Lucas's age or the milestones he imagined his son reaching. Every year on Lucas's birthday, he would find his way to a church, light a candle, and pray for his son's happiness and success. The city changed around him. New buildings rose, old ones fell. But Alexander's routine remained largely the same until that fateful afternoon in early summer. The Miami heat was particularly intense that day, and he had sought shelter in the shade near the Inter-Miami CF training facility. He hadn't chosen the spot for any particular reason. It simply offered respite from the sun and a view of the practice fields in the distance. As he sat there sipping water from a donated bottle, a commotion near the facility's gates caught his attention. A group of fans had gathered, phones raised, as several players emerged from the building. Among them was Lionel Messi, the legendary player who had brought new life to Miami's soccer scene. Alexander watched with mild interest as Messi stopped to sign autographs and take photos with fans. It reminded him of the posters that had once adorned Lucas's bedroom walls, of the dreams his son had shared of becoming a professional player. As the crowd began to disperse, Messi started walking toward his car, but something made him pause. Perhaps it was the way Alexander was watching the practice fields, rather than clamoring for attention like the other onlookers. Or maybe it was simply one of those inexplicable moments when fate decides to intervene. Whatever the reason, Messi changed direction and walked toward where Alexander sat. "Todo bien?" Messi asked quietly, crouching down to Alexander's level. The simple question, "All good?" carried a weight of genuine concern that caught Alexander off guard. For a moment, Alexander couldn't speak. He was one of the world's greatest soccer players, showing kindness to a homeless man on the streets of Miami. The surreal nature of the situation almost made him laugh, but instead, tears began to well up in his eyes. "My son," Alexander started, his voice rough from disuse. "He used to dream of playing like you." The words came out before he could stop them, opening a floodgate of emotions he had kept carefully contained for years. Messi sat down beside him, ignoring the surprised looks from passers-by and his own security detail. There was something in Alexander's voice, in the way he spoke about his son in the past tense, that resonated with the soccer star's own understanding of family and sacrifice. "Tell me about him," Messi said simply, and for the first time in years, Alexander found himself sharing his story with someone who truly seemed to listen. As the Miami afternoon slowly faded into evening, two fathers, one celebrated worldwide, the other forgotten by most, sat and talked about dreams, loss, and the enduring love of a parent for their child. The morning after his encounter with Messi, Alexander woke up feeling different. For the first time in years, the weight of his grief seemed slightly lighter, as if sharing his story had released a small portion of the burden he'd been carrying. The Miami sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, a beautiful sight he had stopped noticing long ago. He couldn't shake the surreal feeling of the previous day's conversation. Messi had listened intently as Alexander shared his story, asking thoughtful questions about Lucas and showing genuine concern. Before leaving, the soccer star had insisted on helping, giving Alexander his word that he would use his connections to try to locate Lucas. "Sometimes life gives us second chances," Messi had said, his voice carrying the wisdom of someone who understood both triumph and struggle. "But we have to be ready to accept them when they come." That morning, instead of his usual spot, Alexander found himself walking toward the small cafeteria where Maria worked. She noticed the change in his demeanor immediately, her weathered face breaking into a warm smile as he approached. "Alejandro," she called out, using the Spanish version of his name as she always did. "Something is different about you today. Your eyes have life again." As he sat at the small table outside her cafeteria, Maria brought him a fresh Cuban coffee and listened as he recounted his meeting with Messi. Her eyes widened with surprise and hope, but more than that, with joy at seeing animation in Alexander's voice again. "Dios obra de maneras misteriosas," she said softly. "God works in mysterious ways." Meanwhile, across town at the Inter Miami training facility, Messi was making good on his promise. After his morning training session, he approached David Beckham, one of the club's owners, with Alexander's story. The two soccer legends sat in Beckham's office, discussing how they might help. "A boy named Lucas Reeves," Beckham mused, typing the name into his computer. "How old would he be now?" 13, Messi replied, remembering the details from Alexander's story. He'd be 13, and according to his father, he was passionate about soccer. Beckham's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing youth soccer databases and competition records. As co-owner of Inter Miami, he had connections throughout the American soccer system, from professional leagues down to youth development programs. "If he continued playing, there should be records," Beckham explained. "Every registered youth player in the country is in the system." As they searched, Alexander spent his day in a state of nervous anticipation. For the first time in years, he visited the local library using their public computers to search for any information about youth soccer in Orlando, where Lucas had gone to live with his aunt Carmen. The librarian, noticing his struggling with the computer, offered to help. When Alexander explained what he was looking for, she helped him navigate through various youth soccer league websites. Though they found no immediate information about Lucas, the simple act of actively searching for his son filled Alexander with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. That evening, as Alexander made his way back to his usual sleeping spot, a sleek black car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down to reveal Messi's familiar face. "Get in," Messi said with a gentle smile. "We need to talk." The car's interior was cool and comfortable, a stark contrast to the humid Miami evening. As they drove through the city streets, Messi shared what he and Beckham had discovered. Lucas had indeed continued playing soccer, showing remarkable talent. He had been part of Orlando City's youth academy for several years, but recently, something had changed. "Alexander," Messi said carefully, "your son isn't in Orlando anymore. 6 months ago, he was recruited by Inter Miami's youth academy. He's here in Miami." The words hit Alexander like a physical force, leaving him breathless. Lucas was here in the same city, breathing the same air, walking the same streets. The possibility seemed too enormous to comprehend. "We found more," Messi continued, his voice gentle but excited. "Lucas has become one of our most promising youth players. The coaches say he has exceptional talent, particularly in his footwork and field vision. They believe he has the potential to go professional." Tears streamed down Alexander's face as he listened to Messi describe his son's achievements. Lucas hadn't just survived without him. He had thrived, pursuing his dreams with the same determination he had shown as a small boy in their backyard. "There's something else you should know," Messi added, pulling out his phone and showing Alexander a photo. This was taken last month at a youth tournament. The photo showed a teenage boy, tall for his age, with Isabella's dark hair and Alexander's eyes, wearing Inter Miami's pink and black colors. He was mid-celebration after scoring a goal, his face split in a wide smile that was purely Isabella's. But what caught Alexander's attention was the small detail in the corner of the photo. A worn soccer ball tucked under the boy's arm, the same one Alexander had given him years ago. "He never gave up on soccer," Messi explained. "And based on what the coaches have told me, he never gave up on you either. He asks about his father sometimes, wondering if you're still out there somewhere." The car came to a stop outside a small hotel in downtown Miami. Messi turned to Alexander, his expression serious but kind. "We have a room for you here," he said, handing Alexander a key card. "Inside you'll find clean clothes, toiletries, and everything you need to get back on your feet. There's also something else. Information about a job at Inter Miami's training facility. It's entry-level, helping maintain the practice fields, but it's a start." Alexander stared at the key card in his trembling hands, overwhelmed by the suddenness of these changes. Part of him wanted to refuse, to retreat to the familiar safety of his life on the streets. But Messi's words from the day before echoed in his mind. "Sometimes life gives us second chances." "Before you make any decisions," Messi said, "there's one more thing you should know. Lucas has a game this Saturday at our youth training facility. He'll be playing in a tournament that could determine his advancement to the next level of our academy program. I think it's time for you to see your son play." The hotel room felt like a foreign country to Alexander. After years on the streets, the simple amenities, a soft bed, running water, clean towels, seemed almost overwhelming. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back at him. His beard was grayer than he remembered, his face more weathered, but somewhere in his eyes, he could see traces of the father he used to be. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Messi had arranged for Alexander to meet with Sarah Martinez, Inter Miami's human resources director, who treated him with respect and dignity as she explained the job opportunity. The position involved maintaining the practice fields where both the professional team and the youth academy trained. "We believe in second chances here," Sarah had said, her kind eyes meeting his without judgment. "And sometimes, the people who need them most are the ones who deserve them most." The job would provide a steady income, health insurance, and most importantly, a chance to rebuild his life. But first, Alexander had to focus on something more immediate, preparing himself to see Lucas play. Messi had been discreet about Alexander's presence, understanding the delicacy of the situation. Only a handful of people knew the full story: Beckham, Sarah, and Maria from the cafeteria, who had practically adopted Alexander as her personal mission. She had insisted on helping him prepare for Saturday's game, bringing him home-cooked meals, and offering motherly advice about reuniting with his son. "Remember, Alejandro," she said, while watching him eat a proper meal for the first time in years, "the boy has carried you in his heart all this time. Children have a capacity for love that we adults sometimes forget." As Saturday approached, Alexander spent hours at the library, catching up on everything he had missed in Lucas's life. The librarian who had helped him before, whose name he learned was Mrs. Thompson, assisted him in finding articles about youth soccer tournaments and Inter Miami's academy program. "Your son scored the winning goal in last month's regional championship," she said excitedly, showing him an article with a small photo of Lucas celebrating with his teammates. The paper said he's one of the most promising young players in the state. Each new piece of information about Lucas filled Alexander with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride in his son's accomplishments and regret for the years he had missed. But there was something else too, a growing sense of purpose and determination. He wanted to be worthy of a second chance, not just for himself, but for Lucas. On Friday afternoon, the day before the game, Messi invited Alexander to watch the first team's training session. Standing at the edge of the immaculately maintained field, Alexander observed the professional players going through their drills. The sight brought back memories of coaching youth soccer, of teaching young players the fundamentals of the game. "Your son trains on these same fields," Messi said, joining him during a break. "The academy coaches say he has a natural understanding of the game. They see the same passion in him that you described from when he was young." That evening, back in his hotel room, Alexander carefully unfolded the letter he had carried with him all these years. The paper was fragile now, the creases deep and worn, but the words were still legible. He read them again, as he had countless times before, but now they felt different. They were no longer just an apology for the past, but perhaps a bridge to the future. He took out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write a new letter to Lucas. This one wasn't about regret or asking for forgiveness. It was about hope, about love that had never died, about dreams that had somehow found their way back to life. He wrote about his pride in Lucas's achievements, about the strength his son had shown in pursuing his passion despite everything. As he wrote, Alexander remembered something Isabella used to say: "En el fútbol, como en la vida, siempre hay otra oportunidad." In soccer, as in life, there is always another chance. The night before the game, Alexander could barely sleep. He stood at his hotel window, looking out over the Miami skyline, the city lights twinkling like stars. Somewhere out there, Lucas was probably preparing for tomorrow's game, unaware that his father would be watching from the sidelines. Sarah had arranged for Alexander to help prepare the field early Saturday morning, giving him a legitimate reason to be there without drawing attention. As he lay in bed, trying to calm his racing thoughts, he remembered the last time he had seen Lucas play, a casual backyard practice session the day before Isabella's accident. He had promised to teach Lucas a new trick that weekend, a promise that had gone unfulfilled. Now, years later, he would finally see his son play again. But this time, Lucas wouldn't be the small boy practicing in their backyard. He would be a talented young athlete, pursuing his dreams on a professional academy field. Alexander touched the key card on his nightstand, this tangible symbol of his second chance, and made a silent promise. This time he would keep it. As sleep finally began to overtake him, Alexander's last thoughts were of tomorrow's game. He imagined Lucas running onto the field, strong and confident, chasing his dreams. And for the first time in years, Alexander allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, those dreams might have room for him too. The Miami morning arrived with a gentle breeze that rustled through the palm trees surrounding Inter Miami's training facility. Alexander had arrived before sunrise, his hands trembling slightly as he helped the grounds crew prepare the field for the youth tournament. The familiar smell of freshly cut grass brought back memories of countless Saturday mornings, spent preparing fields for youth games. But today was different. Today, he would see Lucas play. Sarah had provided him with a staff uniform, a neat polo shirt with the Inter Miami logo and khaki pants that felt strange after years in worn street clothes. His newly trimmed beard and haircut, courtesy of a barber Messi had recommended, made him look more like the father he used to be, though his eyes still carried the weight of his years on the streets. "Remember," Sarah had told him that morning, "take things slowly. We've arranged for you to work near the main field during Lucas's game. Watch, observe, but let's wait for the right moment for any contact." As the morning progressed, families began arriving for the tournament. Alexander's heart nearly stopped when he saw Carmen, Lucas's aunt, walking through the parking lot. She looked older but still carried herself with the same grace as Isabella. Beside her was a tall teenager wearing Inter Miami's pink and black uniform, number 10, Lucas. Alexander gripped his rake tightly, forcing himself to continue working while stealing glances at his son. Lucas had grown so much, yet Alexander could still see the little boy who used to practice in their backyard. He had Isabella's athletic build and graceful movement, but his determined expression was all Alexander's. The tournament was a showcase event for Miami's youth academy, with scouts from various professional clubs in attendance. Messi had explained that Lucas's team would be playing against other top youth academies from Florida, with the winners potentially earning spots in national youth competitions. As the teams began their warm-ups, Alexander watched Lucas go through his pre-game routine. His son moved with confidence, executing perfect passes and showing impressive footwork that made several observers nod appreciatively. During a shooting drill, Lucas curved a ball into the top corner with such precision that even the professional coaches stopped to watch. "He's got real talent," a familiar voice said beside Alexander. It was Messi, who had arrived early to watch the youth games before his own training session. But more importantly, he plays with heart, just like you said he used to. Alexander nodded, unable to speak as he watched Lucas gather with his teammates for their pre-game huddle. The boy who had once dreamed of being a professional player was now on the verge of making that dream a reality, and Alexander was there to witness it, even if from a distance. The game began with intensity, both teams showing why they were considered among the best youth squads in the state. Lucas played in an attacking midfield position, the same role Messi had made famous throughout his career. From the first whistle, it was clear that Lucas was a key player for his team, orchestrating plays and creating opportunities with vision beyond his years. As Alexander worked around the periphery of the field, he could hear snippets of conversation from the crowd. Parents and scouts alike were impressed by Lucas's performance, commenting on his technical skills and tactical understanding of the game. One scout mentioned that he showed professional potential, words that would have once filled Alexander with pride, but now brought a complex mixture of joy and regret. Midway through the first half, Lucas received the ball just outside the penalty area. With a move that seemed to channel his father's old teaching, he feinted past one defender, then another. The crowd held its breath as he approached the goal. Time seemed to slow down as Lucas planted his foot and, with perfect technique, curled the ball into the far corner of the net. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Alexander had to turn away, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. That move, the double feint followed by the curved shot, was exactly what he had promised to teach Lucas that last weekend before everything fell apart. Somehow, some way, Lucas had learned it on his own. Carmen was cheering from the sidelines, recording the goal on her phone while jumping up and down with excitement. Alexander could see her sharing the moment with other parents, her face beaming with pride. He wondered if she ever told Lucas about him, if she kept any photos of their old life, if his son ever asked about the father who had disappeared. As the game progressed, Lucas continued to dominate the midfield. His team was winning, largely thanks to his goal and 2 assists he had provided. But it wasn't just his technical skills that impressed Alexander, it was the way Lucas encouraged his teammates, helped them up when they fell, and showed leadership beyond his years. During a water break, Alexander overheard Lucas talking to a teammate who had missed an easy shot. "Hey, don't worry about it," Lucas said, his voice carrying the same gentle encouragement Alexander used to use with his youth players. "Next time, keep your head up and watch the keeper's movement. You'll get it." The moment hit Alexander hard. Despite everything, despite his absence, Lucas had somehow grown into not just a skilled player, but a kind and supportive person. He had managed to embody the best parts of both his parents, Isabella's grace and Alexander's teaching spirit. As the first half drew to a close, Messi approached Alexander again. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "After the game, win or lose, the academy director wants to speak with Lucas and his aunt. They're planning to offer him a spot in the advanced development program, a fast track to potentially joining our professional team in a few years." Alexander's heart swelled with pride and anticipation. His son was on the verge of achieving his dreams, and by some miracle he was here to witness it. But as he watched Lucas jogging toward the locker room for halftime, a new fear gripped his heart. What right did he have to step back into Lucas's life now, at this crucial moment? Would his presence help or hurt his son's chances at a professional career? The answer, he realized, would have to wait until after the game. For now, all he could do was watch, work, and pray that whatever happened next would be what was best for Lucas. As he continued his groundskeeping duties, Alexander held onto the new letter in his pocket, the one he had written the night before, wondering if he would ever have the chance to give it to his son. The second half of the game began with renewed intensity. Alexander had positioned himself near the corner flag, methodically working while keeping one eye on the field. Lucas's team was ahead 2-1, but their opponents were pressing hard for an equalizer. As the game entered its final 20 minutes, the tension in the air was palpable. Scouts were scribbling notes, and Alexander could see the academy director speaking animatedly with other coaches, gesturing toward Lucas as he controlled the midfield with impressive composure. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lucas was challenging for a high ball near the sideline, directly in front of where Alexander was working. As he jumped, his momentum carried him off the field. Alexander instinctively moved forward, dropping his rake just as Lucas landed hard on the synthetic turf of the sideline. Their eyes met for the first time in 5 years. Time seemed to stop as father and son stared at each other, recognition dawning in Lucas's eyes. The boy's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to something unreadable. Alexander stood frozen, his heart pounding so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. "Lucas," a teammate called, breaking the moment. "The ball's still in play." Lucas blinked, then scrambled to his feet, casting one more bewildered look at Alexander before running back onto the field. But something had changed. His movements, previously so fluid and confident, now carried a slight hesitation, as if his mind was elsewhere. Carmen had noticed the exchange from her position in the stands. Alexander could see her standing up, her hand covering her mouth in surprise. Messi, who had been watching from near the team bench, quickly made his way over to her, explaining the situation in hushed tones. On the field, Lucas was trying to maintain his focus, but his eyes kept drifting to where Alexander stood. During a break in play, Alexander could see Lucas asking his coach something, gesturing toward the sideline. The coach, who had been briefed about the situation, placed a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder and said something that seemed to help him regain his composure. With 5 minutes left in the game, Lucas's team was still clinging to their 1-goal lead. The opposing team won a corner kick, sending everyone forward in search of an equalizer. The ball was cleared, landing perfectly for a counterattack. Lucas received the ball in midfield and began to run. This was the moment scouts live for, a player under pressure, with the game on the line. Alexander watched, barely breathing, as his son dribbled past one defender, then another. The moves were familiar, the same techniques Alexander had taught him years ago, now refined and perfected through years of practice. As Lucas approached the goal, Alexander could almost hear his own voice from the past. "Keep your head up, watch the keeper, and remember, sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." As if hearing those words himself, Lucas looked up, saw the goalkeeper cheating toward the near post, and calmly slotted the ball into the far corner. The crowd erupted as Lucas's teammates mobbed him in celebration. It was more than just a goal. It was a moment of pure poetry, a demonstration of skill and composure that left the scouts nodding appreciatively and the academy director smiling broadly. The final whistle blew moments later, and the field was flooded with celebrating players and parents. Through the chaos, Alexander saw Carmen approaching him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. Behind her, Lucas stood rooted to his spot on the field, still staring at his father. "Alexander," Carmen said softly, reaching him first. "I always hoped you'd find your way back." Before he could respond, Lucas slowly walked over, still in his pink and black uniform, the number 10 slightly dirty from the game. He was taller now, almost eye level with his father, but in his expression, Alexander could see the 8-year-old boy he'd left behind. "Dad?" Lucas's voice cracked slightly on the word. "Is it really you?" Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out both letters, the worn one he'd carried for years and the new one he'd written the night before. His hands trembled as he held them out. "I never stopped loving you, Lucas," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I never stopped hoping I'd see you play again." Lucas looked at the letters, then back at his father's face. The boy's eyes were filling with tears, but there was something else there too, a glimmer of the same hope that had kept Alexander going through his darkest days. "You saw the game?" Lucas asked, his voice small but steady. "You saw me score?" Alexander nodded, unable to speak. Then slowly, Lucas did something that no one expected. He reached into his soccer bag and pulled out a worn soccer ball, the same one from their backyard practices years ago. "I kept it," Lucas said simply. "I practiced those moves you taught me. Every day I never forgot." The ball between them was like a bridge across the years of separation, a tangible link to the life they'd once shared. As father and son stood there on the edge of the field, surrounded by the remnants of the game's excitement, they began to find their way back to each other, one careful word at a time. The Inter-Miami training facility's conference room felt too large and too small at the same time. Alexander sat at one end of the polished table, while Lucas and Carmen sat at the other. Messi had arranged this private space for them to talk, understanding that they needed somewhere quiet and secure for their first real conversation. The academy director had postponed his meeting about Lucas's advancement to the next day, recognizing that some things were more important than soccer. Now in the late afternoon light streaming through the windows, three people connected by love and loss tried to bridge the gap of 5 long years. "I kept every newspaper clipping," Carmen said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. She pulled out a carefully maintained scrapbook from her bag. "Every game, every tournament. I hoped, someday you'd want to see them." Lucas watched silently as his father's trembling hands opened the scrapbook. Alexander's eyes moved over pages of tournament reports, team photos, and local sports section highlights. Each page was a moment he had missed, but Carmen had preserved them all. "Your mother would have been so proud," Alexander said softly, his finger tracing a photo of Lucas holding a tournament MVP trophy. "She always said you had something special." At the mention of Isabella, Lucas's composure cracked slightly. "Do you think about her a lot?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I do, every game, every single game." Alexander closed the scrapbook gently, looking directly at his son. "She's in every sunrise, every sunset. In the way you move on the field, that grace, that's all her. But your vision, your way of reading the game, sometimes I watch you play and I see both of us in you." Carmen pulled out another item from her bag, a framed photo that Alexander recognized immediately. It was from their last family vacation to Key West, just months before the accident. Isabella was laughing, her arms around Lucas, while Alexander pretended to give them both a referee's red card. "Lucas keeps this by his bed," Carmen explained. "He never gave up on you, Alexander. Even when we didn't know where you were. He kept believing you'd find your way back." Lucas reached into his soccer bag and pulled out something that made Alexander's heart skip. The letter he had written all those years ago, the one he thought was lost forever. The paper was worn, carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve, but clearly read many times. "Aunt Carmen found it in my old room," Lucas said, his voice stronger now. After you left. I read it every night for a long time, then before every game. The part where you said my dreams were too bright to be dimmed by your darkness. I never understood what you meant until today." Alexander felt tears rolling down his cheeks, but for once, he didn't try to hide them. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "I thought my grief would destroy your chance at happiness, at achieving your dreams. But I was wrong, Lucas. So wrong. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. But you're here now," Lucas said, something like hope creeping into his voice. "You saw me play today. You saw me score." "I did," Alexander smiled through his tears. "That second goal, the move you used, I never got to teach you that one." Lucas's face lit up slightly. "I figured it out. Watching old videos of you coaching, the ones Aunt Carmen saved. I practiced it over and over until I got it right." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Messi, carrying several Inter-Miami practice jerseys. "Sorry to interrupt," he said with a gentle smile, "but I thought you might want these." He laid the jerseys on the table. They were practice uniforms for the groundskeeping staff, but these were special. Each one had Reeves printed on the back. "The team believes in family," Messi explained. "And we believe in second chances. Alexander, that job offer is still open. Lucas, the academy director, is ready to offer you a spot in our advanced program. But more importantly, we want to help you both rebuild what was lost." Lucas picked up one of the jerseys, running his fingers over the name. "Dad," he said, testing the word carefully, would you help me practice sometimes? Like before?" The question hung in the air, carrying the weight of all the years of separation, all the missed moments, all the hope for the future. Alexander looked at his son, seeing both the little boy he'd left behind and the young man he'd become. "I'd like that more than anything," he replied, "but only if you'll teach me that new move you've developed, the one you used in the first half. I've never seen anything quite like it." A small smile tugged at Lucas's lips. "Deal," he said. "But first, can you tell me about Mom? About the things I might have forgotten, about how she used to cheer at games?" Carmen stood up quietly, touching Messi's arm to indicate they should give father and son some privacy. As they left the room, Alexander moved to sit closer to Lucas, pulling out his wallet where he kept a small photo of Isabella. "Your mother," he began, his voice full of love and memory, "had the most beautiful way of celebrating goals. She would jump up and down, but always with such grace, just like you did today after your first goal." Outside the conference room, Carmen wiped tears from her eyes as Messi placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Through the glass, they could see father and son, heads bent together over old photos and memories, beginning the long journey of healing and reconnection. "Football has a way of bringing people together," Messi said softly. "But love has a way of finding its way home." The following week brought changes that seemed both surreal and somehow perfectly natural. Alexander moved into a small apartment near the Inter Miami facility, furnished with basic necessities through the club's community outreach program. The walls were bare except for 2 items, the family photo from Key West and a new team photo of Lucas with his youth academy squad. His first day as part of the grounds crew felt like stepping into a familiar dream. The morning routine of checking the field conditions, ensuring proper irrigation, and maintaining the perfect playing surface brought back memories of his days as a youth coach. But now every task carried new meaning. He was helping maintain the fields where his son trained. Lucas had begun his advanced training program, spending extra hours at the facility after his regular academy sessions. Often Alexander would glimpse him working with the specialized coaches, his determination evident in every movement. Sometimes their eyes would meet across the field, and they would share a small wave or nod, small gestures building a bridge across the years of separation. Maria from the cafeteria had practically adopted both Reeves' men, insisting on feeding them proper meals and offering motherly advice about rebuilding their relationship. She had set up a small table in the corner of her cafeteria where they could have lunch together on the days when Lucas's training schedule allowed. "Poco a poco," she would say, watching them navigate their careful conversations. Little by little, the heart remembers its way home. One afternoon, as Alexander was finishing up his work on the practice fields, he found Lucas waiting for him, holding his worn soccer ball. "I have an hour before Aunt Carmen picks me up," Lucas said, trying to sound casual despite the nervousness in his voice. "Maybe we could... if you're not too tired..." Alexander felt his heart swell. "I'm never too tired to practice with you, son." They moved to one of the smaller training areas, and for the first time in 5 years, father and son began to play together. Lucas showed Alexander the new techniques he'd learned, while Alexander shared stories about the origins of certain moves, including some he'd learned from watching Isabella play in college. "Mom played in college?" Lucas asked, surprised. "I didn't know that." "She was amazing," Alexander smiled, demonstrating a particular turn that had been Isabella's signature move. "She played midfielder too, just like you." That's where you get your field vision from. As they practiced, other academy players and staff members would stop to watch, some nodding approvingly at the sight of father and son reconnecting through the beautiful game. Messi, finishing his own training session, paused to observe them for a while. "Your father was a good coach," he told Lucas later. "You can see it in the way he explains things, how he breaks down complex movements into simple steps. Maybe someday, when you're both ready, he could help with some of our youth development programs." The suggestion planted a seed in both their minds, a possible future where they could not only rebuild their relationship, but also work together, sharing their love of the game with others. Carmen had been surprisingly supportive of their reconnection, though Alexander could see the protective worry in her eyes. She had raised Lucas as her own for 5 years, and her concern for his emotional well-being was evident. But she also saw how Lucas seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight he'd carried for years was finally lifting. "He smiles more now," she told Alexander one evening as they watched Lucas training. Real smiles like when he was little. And he talks about the future more confidently, as if he's finally sure of his place in the world. The academy director had been true to his word, officially offering Lucas a spot in the advanced development program. The opportunity came with additional training sessions, specialized coaching, and a clear path toward professional development. But more importantly, it meant Lucas would be spending more time at the facility, more chances for father and son to rebuild their bond. One evening, as they sat in Maria's cafeteria sharing a meal, Lucas suddenly asked, "Dad, do you remember that promise you made? The last weekend before everything changed. You said you'd teach me a special move." Alexander's heart tightened at the memory. "The double step over with a back heel finish. I never got the chance to show you. Could you teach me now?" Lucas asked softly. "I mean, I know I'm older now and maybe it's too late." "It's never too late, son," Alexander replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Some things just need time to find their moment." As they finished their meal, Maria watched them from behind her counter, wiping tears from her eyes. She had seen Alexander at his lowest on the streets, and now she was witnessing his resurrection through love, second chances, and the beautiful game that had brought father and son back together. Later that night, as Alexander lay in his new apartment, he could hear the distant sounds of the city, so different from the street noises he'd grown accustomed to. On his nightstand, next to the family photo, sat his old whistle from his coaching days. Messi had found it among the donations at the church and returned it to him, suggesting that sometimes the past holds the keys to the future. Alexander picked up the whistle, its familiar weight in his hand bringing back memories of countless practice sessions and games. But now, those memories were joined by new ones. Lucas's smile as he mastered a new technique, the sound of their laughter echoing across the training field, the quiet conversations over Maria's Cuban sandwiches. Tomorrow, he would teach Lucas that promised move, fulfilling a pledge made years ago. And maybe, just maybe, they would both learn something new in the process, about soccer, about forgiveness, about the enduring power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. A month had passed since the fateful game that brought Alexander and Lucas back together. The Miami summer was in full swing, bringing afternoon thunderstorms that left the training fields glistening in the evening sun. For Alexander, each day brought new discoveries about the young man his son had become, and new opportunities to make up for lost time. The Inter-Miami facility had become more than just a workplace. It was where their new life was taking root. Alexander had proven himself invaluable to the grounds team, his attention to detail and understanding of how field conditions affected play, earning him respect among the staff. But it was his growing involvement with the youth academy that truly marked his renaissance. It started small, Lucas asking him to stay after his shifts to help with specific techniques. Other young players began to notice the precise way Alexander explained movements, the patient manner in which he broke down complex skills into manageable steps. Soon, some of them were asking if they could join the impromptu training sessions. Messi, who often observed these sessions while cooling down from his own training, approached the academy director with a suggestion. "There's something special happening there," he said, gesturing toward where Alexander was demonstrating a particular ball control technique to a small group of academy players, Lucas among them. Sometimes the best coaches are the ones who have known both triumph and struggle. They understand the heart of the game, not just the mechanics. The academy director agreed, and Alexander was offered a part-time position as a skills coach for the youth academy, working around his grounds crew duties. The offer came with proper coaching certifications and training, a chance to rebuild not just his relationship with Lucas, but his professional life as well. Lucas had thrived in the advanced development program, his natural talent enhanced by the specialized training. But it was the time spent with his father that seemed to fuel his greatest improvements. They had developed a routine of staying late 3 days a week, working on specific skills and techniques, but more importantly, talking. During these sessions, they began to fill in the gaps of their lost years. Lucas shared stories about his time in Orlando, the tournaments, the victories and defeats, the moments when he'd wished his father had been there to see him play. Alexander listened with a mixture of pride and regret, but Lucas always found ways to turn the conversations toward the future rather than dwelling on the past. "You're here now," Lucas would say whenever he sensed his father's guilt surfacing. That's what matters. One evening, as they practiced under the field lights, Lucas asked about the memories that had sustained Alexander during his darkest times. "I kept every happy moment like a photograph in my mind," Alexander replied, demonstrating a defensive move as he spoke. "Your first successful penalty kick, the way your mother would cheer at your games, the sound of you practicing in the backyard, those memories, they kept me alive when I thought I couldn't go on." Lucas absorbed this, then asked softly, "Did you ever think about coming back?" "Before." Alexander paused, the question hitting him hard. "Every day," he admitted, "but I couldn't face the possibility of hurting you more. I needed to find my way back to myself first. Meeting Messi, it wasn't just about him helping me find you. It was about him helping me believe I could be worthy of being your father again." "You never stopped being my father," Lucas said, executing a perfect pass to emphasize his point. "Even when I was angry, even when I didn't understand, you were always my dad." Their relationship had begun to extend beyond the training facility. Carmen had invited Alexander to Sunday dinners, where Lucas would proudly share his progress in both soccer and school. These gatherings were sometimes awkward, the weight of the past still present, but they were also healing, creating new memories to stand alongside the old ones. Maria had become an unofficial family member, her cafeteria serving as a safe haven where father and son could share meals and conversations. She kept photos of them on her wall, next to pictures of her own family, and would beam with pride when customers asked about the father-son duo who had become regulars at her corner table. "Es un milagro," she would say, watching them interact. But miracles need nurturing to grow. The Inter-Miami community had embraced their story, seeing in it a reflection of the sport's power to transform lives. Young players looked up to Lucas, not just for his skills, but for his resilience and capacity for forgiveness. Parents would seek out Alexander for advice, both about soccer and about rebuilding relationships with their own children. One particularly humid evening, as they were packing up after a training session, Lucas suddenly said, "I found some of Mom's old college soccer videos in Aunt Carmen's attic. Maybe we could watch them together." This weekend, Alexander felt his heart skip a beat. They hadn't yet directly shared memories of Isabella, both still careful around the tender subject of their loss, but Lucas's suggestion felt right, a way to honor her memory together, to keep her part of their rebuilding relationship. "I'd like that very much," Alexander replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother was the best player in her college team, you know. That move you're working on, the one that gives defenders so much trouble, she used to do something similar." Lucas's eyes lit up. "Really? Could you teach me her version?" "Better yet," Alexander smiled. "We can learn it together from watching her play. She always said the best teachers are the ones who never stop learning themselves." As they walked off the field, the setting sun painting the Miami sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Alexander felt a deep sense of peace. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was full of possibilities. Each day brought new opportunities to strengthen their bond, to honor Isabella's memory, and to build something beautiful from the ashes of their pain. The worn soccer ball Lucas still carried had become a symbol of their journey, scarred but intact, holding both old memories and new possibilities. Like them, it had weathered difficult times, but remained ready for the next game, the next practice, the next moment of connection between father and son. The weekend arrived with the kind of perfect weather that Miami sometimes offered in late summer. Clear skies, gentle breezes, and temperatures that made being outdoors a pleasure rather than a challenge. Alexander and Lucas had agreed to meet at Carmen's house, where the old videos of Isabella's college soccer career waited to be rediscovered. As Alexander drove to the house, his hands slightly trembling on the steering wheel, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. The Inter-Miami facility had become like a second home. His coaching position with the youth academy was flourishing, and most importantly, his relationship with Lucas was growing stronger each day. Carmen's house was a modest but well-maintained home in a quiet neighborhood. As Alexander parked in the driveway, he noticed the soccer goal in the backyard, visible through the side gate. It was the same one he and Isabella had given Lucas for his 7th birthday, somehow preserved through all these years. Lucas was waiting on the front porch, holding a box of old VHS tapes and DVDs. His face lit up when he saw his father, an expression that still caught Alexander off guard with its unconditional warmth. Aunt Carmen converted most of Mom's old college games to DVD, Lucas explained as they went inside. She says she did it years ago, hoping that someday we'd want to watch them together. The living room was comfortably furnished, with traces of Lucas's soccer journey evident in the trophies and photos displayed on shelves and walls. Alexander noticed that among them was the family photo from Key West, the one he now had a copy of in his apartment, given a place of honor on the main wall. Carmen had prepared snacks and drinks before tactfully excusing herself to run errands, giving father and son space to share this important moment. As Lucas set up the first DVD, Alexander settled onto the couch, his heart racing with anticipation of seeing Isabella again, even if only on screen. The video quality was grainy, typical of recordings from that era, but Isabella's grace on the field was unmistakable. She moved with the same fluid confidence that Lucas now displayed, her number 10 jersey a blur of motion as she orchestrated plays from midfield. "She was amazing," Lucas whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. "I never knew. I knew she played, but I didn't know she was this good." Alexander smiled, pointing out specific moments. "Watch how she reads the game, how she knows where her teammates will be before they get there. That's what I see in you when you play. That same instinct, that same vision." They spent hours watching the games, Alexander sharing stories about each one, filling in the context that the videos couldn't provide. He told Lucas about how he and Isabella had met at a soccer tournament, how she had thoroughly outplayed him in a co-ed match, and how her competitive spirit had been matched only by her kindness. "Your mother believed that soccer was more than just a game," Alexander explained, pausing one video where Isabella was helping up an opponent who had fallen. "She saw it as a way to bring people together, to teach life lessons about teamwork and perseverance." Lucas absorbed every detail, occasionally sharing his own memories of Isabella, fragments from his early childhood that he had held onto tightly. "I remember her singing during car rides to my games," he said softly, "and how she always had orange slices for the whole team at halftime." As they watched, Alexander noticed something remarkable: the moves and techniques they had been practicing together at the Inter Miami facility. Many of them were variations of Isabella's playing style. Without realizing it, Lucas had developed a playing style that combined elements from both his parents. "It's like she's been helping me all along," Lucas mused, watching his mother execute a particularly skillful turn. "Even when I couldn't remember all the details, something inside me remembered how she moved, how she played." The afternoon light was fading when they finally finished watching the last video. Carmen had returned quietly at some point, and now stood in the kitchen doorway watching father and son with tears in her eyes. "Isabella would be so proud of you both," she said softly. "Not just for your soccer achievements, but for finding your way back to each other." Lucas looked at his father, then at the soccer goal visible through the window. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "would you want to go out back, just for a little while? The goal? It's the same one you and Mom gave me." Alexander felt tears welling up in his eyes but nodded. Together they walked out to the backyard, Lucas retrieving his worn soccer ball from his bag. The goal had been well maintained, its white paint fresh, the net properly secured, a testament to Carmen's understanding of its significance. As they began to pass the ball back and forth in the fading light, Alexander could almost feel Isabella's presence. She was there in Lucas's movements, in the way he approached the game with both passion and joy, in the connection that father and son were rebuilding on this patch of grass that held so many memories. "You know," Lucas said, demonstrating a move they had just watched Isabella perform in one of the videos, "I always believed you'd come back. Even when everyone told me I needed to accept that you were gone, I kept believing. Mom used to say that love finds a way home." Alexander caught the ball, holding it for a moment as he looked at his son, this remarkable young man who had somehow inherited the best of both his parents and emerged stronger from their family's darkest times. "Your mother was right," he said finally. "Love does find its way home. Sometimes it just needs a little help from a soccer ball, a legendary player named Messi, and a son who never stopped believing." In the growing dusk, father and son continued to play, their shadows stretching long across the grass, merging and separating like the years that had kept them apart. But now in this backyard that held both old memories and new beginnings, they were writing a new chapter in their story. one that honored the past while embracing the future they were building together. 6 months had passed since that first emotional game where father and son reunited. The Miami winter had brought milder temperatures and perfect conditions for soccer, and the Inter-Miami facility was buzzing with excitement. The Youth Academy was preparing for its biggest event of the year, a prestigious tournament that would bring scouts from professional clubs across the world. Alexander had fully settled into his dual role as grounds crew supervisor and Youth Academy skills coach. His transformation from the man who had lived on the streets was remarkable, but those who knew him best could see that the real change went far deeper than his appearance. There was a light in his eyes now, a sense of purpose that came from more than just having a job and a home. The coaching staff had begun to rely heavily on his expertise, particularly his ability to connect with young players who were struggling with confidence or technique. His own journey from loss to redemption had given him a unique perspective that he used to help others find their way through difficult times. Lucas had continued to excel in the advanced development program, his natural talent enhanced by the focused training and, most importantly, the restored connection with his father. Their evening practice sessions had become legendary among the academy players, with others often staying late just to watch and learn. "Your father sees the game differently," one of Lucas's teammates commented during a water break. "He doesn't just teach the moves, he helps us understand the why behind everything we do." The tournament was approaching, and Lucas had been selected as captain of the Inter-Miami youth team. It was a responsibility he took seriously, showing leadership qualities that reminded many of both his father's teaching spirit and his mother's natural ability to bring people together. One evening, as they were preparing the field for the tournament, Messi joined father and son during their post-training session. He had become a mentor to Lucas and a friend to Alexander, often sharing his own insights about the game and life. "You know," Messi said, watching Lucas practice a particularly complex sequence of moves, "when I first met your father near these fields, I saw something in his eyes, a mix of loss and hope that reminded me of why I fell in love with this game. Soccer isn't just about skill or victory. It's about family, about finding your way home." Alexander nodded, remembering that day that had changed everything. "I never thought I'd be here," he admitted. "Coaching, watching my son play, being part of this community. Sometimes it feels like a dream." "Not a dream," Lucas interjected, joining them after completing his drill. "This is real, Dad. We've built this together." The tournament week arrived with all the excitement and nervous energy that surrounded major sporting events. Teams from across the Americas had gathered in Miami, bringing with them dreams of discovery and advancement in the soccer world. Inter-Miami's youth team had drawn a challenging group, facing talented squads from Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico. Lucas, wearing the captain's armband with pride, led his team through their preparations with a composure that belied his age. Alexander found himself dividing his time between ensuring the fields were in perfect condition and providing last-minute coaching advice to the nervous young players. But his heart was with Lucas, watching his son embrace this moment that they had worked toward together. The night before the tournament began, after most people had left the facility, Alexander found Lucas sitting alone on the main field, looking up at the stars. "Nervous?" Alexander asked, sitting beside his son. "A little," Lucas admitted, "but mostly I'm just grateful. A year ago I was playing soccer to hold on to memories of you and Mom. Now I'm playing because I love it, and I get to share that love with both of you, even if Mom can only watch from above." Alexander put his arm around his son's shoulders. "She sees you, Lucas. Every move, every goal, every time you help a teammate up after a fall, that's her spirit living through you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, father and son under the Miami night sky, until Lucas spoke again. "You know what I dream about now, Dad? Not just playing professionally, though I still want that. I dream about someday coaching together, helping other kids find their way through soccer, just like we found our way back to each other." The words hit Alexander with unexpected force. In all his hopes for redemption, for rebuilding his relationship with his son, he had never dared to dream quite so far ahead. But here was Lucas, already envisioning a future where their shared passion for the game could help others. "Your mother used to say that soccer was a language of hope," Alexander said softly, "that it could speak to people's hearts in ways that words couldn't. I'm beginning to understand what she meant." As they walked off the field together, Lucas carrying his ever-present worn soccer ball. They passed the spot where they had first locked eyes during that life-changing game months ago. So much had changed since then, yet the essence of who they were, father and son, bound by love and the beautiful game, had remained constant. "Whatever happens in the tournament," Lucas said as they reached the parking lot, "we've already won what matters most." Alexander looked at his son, this remarkable young man who had found it in his heart to forgive and rebuild, and felt a profound sense of peace. The tournament ahead would bring its own challenges and triumphs, but their greatest victory had already been achieved. They had found their way home to each other. The final day of the tournament arrived under perfect Miami skies. Inter Miami's youth team had surpassed all expectations, advancing to the championship match against a highly rated team from São Paulo. The stands were packed with scouts, families, and soccer enthusiasts, all eager to witness the culmination of this prestigious event. Alexander had been up since dawn, ensuring the field was in immaculate condition for the final. As he worked, he remembered all the moments that had led to this day, from those dark times on the streets to the miracle of reconnecting with Lucas, from those first tentative practice sessions to the confident young man his son had become. In the team's preparation room, Lucas gathered his teammates for a pre-game talk. His words carried echoes of both his father's teaching wisdom and his mother's inspiring spirit. "Today isn't just about winning," he told them. "It's about playing with heart, about supporting each other, about showing the world what family means, because that's what we are, a family." The Inter Miami coaching staff had asked Alexander to join them on the bench for the final, recognizing the integral role he had played in developing not just Lucas, but many of the team's players. As he took his place, he felt Carmen's hand squeeze his shoulder supportively. She had become not just Lucas's aunt, but a bridge between their past and present, helping them honor Isabella's memory while building their new future. The game began at a furious pace, both teams showing why they had reached the final. Lucas, wearing his number 10 jersey, orchestrated the midfield with a combination of skill and vision that had scouts scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Midway through the first half, Lucas received the ball just outside the penalty area. In that moment, time seemed to slow down as he executed a series of movements that brought tears to Alexander's eyes. It was the combination of Isabella's signature turn and the technique they had spent months perfecting together. The ball flew into the top corner of the net, a goal that would have made any professional proud. As his teammates mobbed him in celebration, Lucas looked to the bench, finding his father's eyes. In that glance, they shared more than just the joy of a goal. They shared the understanding of how far they had come together. The game remained tight until the final minutes, when Lucas provided a perfect assist for his teammate to score the winning goal. As the final whistle blew, the Inter Miami youth team erupted in celebration, their pink and black jerseys blending together in a joyous mass at the center of the field. Among the chaos of the celebration, Messi made his way to Alexander. "You both found your way," he said with a warm smile. "And in doing so, you've helped create something beautiful here. The academy director wants to offer Lucas a professional youth contract, but more than that, they want to expand your role in the youth development program." Before Alexander could respond, Lucas broke away from his celebrating teammates and ran to embrace his father. They held each other tight, both crying unashamedly, as the Miami sunshine bathed them in golden light. "She would be so proud," Carmen said, joining them with tears in her eyes, "of both of you." Later that evening, after the celebrations had quieted, father and son returned to their special corner of the training field, the same spot where months ago a chance encounter had set them on the path to reunion. Lucas still carried his worn soccer ball, now bearing the scuffs and marks of countless practice sessions and games. "Dad," Lucas said, spinning the ball in his hands, "remember when you first taught me to play? You said soccer was more than just a game. It was a way to tell our stories." Alexander nodded, remembering those innocent days before loss had torn their family apart. "Your mother used to say the same thing." "Well, I think I understand now," Lucas continued. "Our story isn't just about loss anymore. It's about finding our way back, about how love like soccer gives us second chances if we're brave enough to take them." As they passed the ball back and forth in the growing dusk, Maria appeared with 2 cups of her special Cuban coffee. She had become family to them both, her cafeteria a constant in their rebuilt life. Mi familia, she said warmly, watching them practice. Sometimes the longest journeys lead us right back home. Alexander looked at his son, this remarkable young man who had found the strength to forgive and the courage to rebuild. In Lucas's playing style, he could see both Isabella's grace and his own determination, but more than that, he could see the future, bright and full of possibilities. The Inter Miami facility had become more than just a workplace or training ground. It was where their family had been reborn, where broken dreams had been mended, and where new dreams were taking flight. The professional youth contract would open new doors for Lucas, while Alexander's expanded role in the youth program would allow them to help other families find their way through the beautiful game. As night fell over Miami, father and son continued to play, their shadows merging with the memories of the past and the promises of the future. The worn soccer ball moved between them, carrying with it the story of loss, love, and redemption that had brought them full circle. Above them, a star shone particularly bright, and both knew that Isabella was watching, her spirit living on in every pass, every goal, and every moment of joy they shared on and off the field. "Ready to go home, Dad?" Lucas asked as the field lights began to dim. Alexander looked at his son, at the facility that had given them a second chance and at the life they had rebuilt together. "We are home, son," he said softly. "We are home."